An obscure bit of colonial history dating back to a summer night mid-18th century led to a New England town celebrating frogs in sculpture, poetry, and song to this day. David Wright of Rhode Island PBS Weekly takes this leap of whimsy as part of our arts and culture series, Canvas.
Whether you arrive in Windham, Connecticut from the north, south, east, or west, one of the first things to greet you is a large green face.
They've got a lot of character too, don't you think?
They do.
They do.
4 big bullfrogs, as solid as anvils, planted there on the Willimantic Bridge like a concrete lily pad right in the middle of town.
So I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask this, but what's with all the frogs?
So welcome to Windham. That is a very popular question. A lot of people who arrive here say, what's the deal with the frogs?
At the pharmacy and the library on Main Street, the hospital and the local radio station, Windham honors amphibians. The town's only real rival in frog mania may be Calaveras County, California, home of the Jumping Frog Jubilee, celebrating Mark Twain's famous 1865 short story. But Windham's association with amphibians predates that by more than a century, an obscure bit of colonial history.
1754, summertime. It was right in the middle of the French and Indian War, so people were a bit on edge. I think I saw some numbers that there were approximately 100 people living within the general area of this green right here.
So they heard a noise.
They heard a noise, and it was about 100 yards into the woods off the road.
Susan Herrick is an herpetologist, a.k.a. frog biologist, who was born and raised here.
Men are getting up out of their houses and arming themselves, and against what they thought was an invasion of either natives or somebody else during this rough period of time. And everybody was apparently afeared for their lives, is what some of the writing is.
Because of the noise.
Because of the noise.
Herrick believes the terrible sound that so spooked the locals in 1754 was the result of a colonial climate disaster.
It's purported that there was a drought here at that time. In 1754, between late June and early July, apparently it was pretty dry. And I think the pond edge shrunk a little too much, and they gave up trying to hold territories and did what we call mate acquisition strategy, switching. So instead of defending territories, they did what's called a lek, which is where all the males just sort of gather together and display themselves, sort of like a singles bar, if you will.
So instead of singing a froggy love song, they were kind of having a communal primal scream.
Having a mosh pit, yeah, exactly.
In her research at the University of Connecticut, she spent more than 3,000 hours recording bullfrogs in the wild.
This is what a frog pond would normally sound like.
Over here.
Okay, so that's whole songs. Now here they start switching notes. So they're listening to each other.
She's built a recreation of what the 1754 frog pond might have sounded like, with all of the bullfrogs bleating at once.
So this is what I think it could potentially have sounded like on the battlefield, so to speak, right?
Sounds like a big swarm of angry bees.
Nevertheless, when word got around that this little town had panicked, taking up arms against a bunch of bullfrogs,
The story had legs.
The story had legs. The story had legs.
the great Windham frog fight became an American batrachomachia, the stuff of epic comic poems, at least 3 of them. Before the U.S. had a national currency, banknotes issued by the Windham Bank featured a frog standing on top of another frog. In 1905, the local opera house even mounted an operetta, a musical, The Frogs of Windham, which has enjoyed several local revivals. And to this day, the local brewery has an annual Hop Fest.
So you've embraced the frog, which was originally a sort of a joke at Windham's expense.
A joke at Windham's expense, but we're pretty good at laughing at ourselves. Yep.
The bridge itself is an example of that good humor, Built 20 years ago by the state of Connecticut, the locals insisted it pay tribute to their heritage.
Apparently it was pretty embarrassing for the colonists back then, but nowadays we look back and we laugh and we think, oh, that must have been, the equivalent of nowadays online ribbing, these ribbing.
So forever these frogs will troll the town of Windham.
Troll the town of Windham forever.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm David Wright in Windham, Connecticut.